What up, everybody? This is Alan, a.k.a. Bluke, and I want y'all to follow along with me, and I'm going to show y'all how I built this headboard out of solid oak. I started out by gluing up 2 solid wood panels, and then after that, I went into Shaper Studio and formed my shapes so I can cut out a template using the Shaper origin. After that, I traced the template onto this sheet of 3/4 inch plywood, did a rough cutout with the jigsaw, and then I took a flush trim bit and cleaned up that edge so I have a nice clean line. I did all of that on plywood just so I can have kind of like a practice run, and then I repeated that whole process for my solid wood panels. The plywood didn't go to waste. I just used those pieces to close out the back of the headboard when I was done. So that was the plywood, and here are my solid wood panels. Next, I went back to the Shaper origin to cut out the next template that I used to make the piece that goes on top of those panels. I traced that template onto a board wide enough to accommodate the template. Then I went over to my joiner. After I did a rough cutout, I went to the joiner, flattened one face, then went to the planer to flatten the other face and get it to the thickness that I wanted it. And then I put my template back on, and I cleaned up the bottom edge. I didn't do the top edge yet because I wanted to leave the piece a little wider to give me more to hang on to when I cut this groove into the bottom of this piece so it can accept my panels. Everything was looking good up to this point, so I used this white side railing style bit set to cut the groove into that piece, and I also cut the grooves and the tenons for my center and 2 side pieces. Next, it was on to this big ass raised panel bit. This is also a white side bit, and then it had a back cutter on it. And I used that bit to form the edges for my center panels. Both the raised panel bit and the railing style bits have an OG style profile on them. And this raised panel bit has this back cutter on it. OG style profile will be on the front, and then this back cutter makes the panel fit inside the groove. These panels were kind of cumbersome on this little router table. So later, I rigged something up on a piece of melamine so I can have a bigger surface for routing more panels and pieces. And that's a dry fit. So far so good. I had to trim all of that up later with my track saw. Now this is my first time making solid wood raised panels, and really my first time doing a lot of this stuff, so y'all just gotta bear with me. Next, I went back to the jigsaw, did my rough cutout, put my template back on, went back over to the router table, and got that edge nice and clean on that top piece. Now let's get this template back off, pop it back on here, and do another dry fit. See what it looked like. And I surprised myself up to this point. I still need to add 2 more pieces to the top. I need to add the legs, and I added a stretcher in between the legs for my center support for my slats. But so far we looking good. I seen a woman on YouTube, her page is called Cheryl's Woodshop Diaries. I seen her use this method to make an arch headboard for a bed that she was building, so I figured I'd give it a try. And it came out pretty nice. So basically I glued a bunch of scrap pieces together roughly in the shape that I wanted. Then I went over to my joiner, flattened one face, flattened the other face on the planer, drew out my template, did a rough cutout on the bandsaw, and then off camera, I cleaned that piece up with my template and a flush trim bit. After that, I set that piece to the side and I started gluing up my main panel. First, I started by adding these space balls evenly in all of my grooves. And what these space balls do is they allow the wood panel to expand and contract seasonally without cracking. Then after that, I put glue on all of my tenons, started putting it together, and then adding my clamps. And then after that, I took some measurements to make sure everything was symmetrical. For the final piece on the top of this headboard, I used the last piece that I made as a template to start building this form. I was really trying to get through this build without actually having to bend any wood since I had never done it before, but I felt like this was the best method for a nice mate between my top 2 pieces. After building the form, I had to make 20 plus pieces of veneer that were less than 1/8 of an inch thick. And since my planer only went down to 1/8 of an inch, I had to get creative to get these pieces a little bit thinner so they would bend better. Even after doing all that, I still had to glue this last piece up into 2 separate stages just to make sure I got this piece down into this curve nice and tight. I didn't even record the second glue up, but this is the first glue up. And basically for the second one, I just glued the second half of strips to that first half of strips. And then here I'm removing all these damn clamps. It must have been about 40 clamps on here. Initially, this piece looked pretty nasty coming out of the clamps, but once I got all the glue cleaned up, got this piece trimmed up, ran it across the joiner and put it through the planer, it came out looking pretty decent. Now that that's done, I set those pieces to the side, and my next step was to attach the legs. To attach the legs, I used dominoes, some glue, and some pocket hole screws on the back side. Here I'm routing a profile on one of my end pieces because it's about time to start putting all of this stuff together. Next, I used a 3/8 inch Forstner bit to countersink my screws, then pilot holes, and then I glued, clamped, and screwed, and I attached this piece with 1.5 inch screws. To attach the last piece, I pretty much went with the same method, but since the top piece is visible, I cut some 3/8 inch plugs to cover those holes, and I tried my best to grain match my plugs with that top piece. Here I'm adding some 1/8 inch strips to the face of these legs, and I attach those with glue and pin nails. To attach the bed rails to the headboard and the footboard, I decided to add threaded inserts. Now the brackets that I ordered, they came with wood screws, and I don't really like the idea of putting wood screws directly into the wood for parts that have to be potentially taken apart. So I decided to add some threaded inserts. So I drilled my holes. I put some epoxy down in those holes just for added security, not really necessary. And then I got my inserts threaded down into the wood. After that, I took that plywood from the beginning of the video and I closed out the back of the headboard. I got it stained, and I also put my stretcher at the bottom. Then it was on to finishing. And to finish this, it was really a 3-step process. First, I added a coat of General Finishes pewter dye stain, and then I went with a tobacco stain for the color. And then after that, I added 3 coats of water-based satin polyurethane. Now, if you made it this far, hopefully you're interested enough to at least like the video, subscribe to my page, share it, tell a friend about it, and hopefully next year I can post more content like this. All the videos ain't gonna be this long, I promise you, because this is a lot of work, at least for me anyway. I am not a content creator, but I just wanted to get this out there. So hopefully y'all like it. Subscribe to the page, and thanks for watching. It's built by Blue, and I'm out.